You're still standing after more than 2 trials. That can't be real, the Apache beauty said. Life had once moved at a steady and predictable pace for him. He woke up every morning before sunrise, prepared his day with quiet focus, and believed that hard work was enough to keep everything in place. He was not rich, but he was proud of earning honestly. People respected him, his family trusted him, and he trusted the future. He never imagined how quickly everything could change. The first signs of trouble came softly, almost like a warning he failed to understand. His workplace began to feel different. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Decisions were made without his input. Small mistakes which were once ignored were suddenly pointed out loudly. He tried to correct himself, worked longer hours and stayed silent, believing patience would fix everything. But patience was not enough. One morning, he was called into a small office with cold walls and serious faces. Words like downsizing and restructuring were used, but the meaning was simple. He was no longer needed. The chair beneath him felt harder than usual, and the room seemed smaller. He nodded, signed the papers, and walked out carrying a box of his belongings. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. But for him, the ground felt unsteady. Losing the job was only the beginning. News spread quickly and people began to judge without asking questions. Some believed he had failed. Others assumed he had done something wrong. Calls stopped coming. Friends who once laughed with him now avoided eye contact. He realized how fragile respect could be when success disappeared. At home, silence grew heavier. He tried to hide his worry, but it showed in his eyes. Nights became long, filled with thoughts that refused to rest. He questioned his worth, replayed past choices, and wondered where he had gone wrong. Each rejection letter and unanswered application chipped away at his confidence. He had never felt so small. To survive, he took temporary work wherever he could find it. The pay was low and the hours were long, but he accepted without complaint. Pride had no place when responsibilities waited at home. His hands, once clean and steady, grew rough and tired. Still, he kept going, believing that effort would eventually open a door. During this time, he often visited a quiet open space near the edge of town to clear his mind. It was there that he first noticed her. She stood out, not because she tried to, but because of the calm strength in her presence. She had sharp eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface, and her posture carried quiet confidence. People referred to her as an Apache woman, someone connected deeply to her roots and values. She did not approach him at first. She simply observed, noticing the way he sat alone, lost in thought. Unlike others, she did not judge him by his worn clothes or tired face. She had seen struggle before, both in people and in life itself. To her, pain had a familiar shape. One evening, as the sky darkened, she spoke to him for the first time. Her voice was steady, without softness or cruelty. She asked simple questions, nothing personal, nothing invasive. He answered briefly, unsure why her presence felt different. There was no pity in her eyes, only curiosity. Over the following days, their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes they exchanged a few words, sometimes just a nod. He did not share his story, but somehow she sensed the weight he carried. She once said that life tests people in unexpected ways, and that not everyone passes the first test. He did not reply, but her words stayed with him. The first real trial of his life was not just the loss of work or money. It was the slow breakdown of belief. He struggled to believe in himself when the world seemed to have turned away. Yet, each morning he still stood up, still moved forward, even when hope felt thin. There were days when he wanted to stop trying. When exhaustion pressed down on him so hard that breathing felt like effort. On those days, he remembered the look in her eyes, not sympathy, but respect for endurance. It reminded him that being broken did not mean being finished. As weeks turned into months, he learned to live with uncertainty. He learned how to wait without despair and how to work without recognition. The pain did not disappear, but it shaped him quietly. He became more aware of his thoughts, more careful with his words, and more patient with others who struggled. The Apache woman watched this change from a distance. She saw how he bent under pressure but did not collapse. In her culture, strength was not measured by victory, but by the ability to remain standing after loss. Though she said little, her presence became a silent witness to his endurance. By the end of the first trial, nothing had returned to normal. His life was still difficult, and answers were still unclear. But something important had happened within him. He no longer defined himself by what he had lost. He began to understand that survival itself was a form of courage. The first trial took away his comfort, his pride, and his certainty. But it also revealed a strength he did not know he had. And somewhere nearby, a woman with sharp eyes and deep understanding took note of a man who refused to fall completely, even when life pushed him to the edge. After the first trial, life did not become easier. In fact, it seemed to watch him closely, waiting for the moment when his guard was down. Just when he had learned how to live with uncertainty, a second and heavier trial slowly entered his life, testing not only his strength but his spirit. The temporary work he relied on began to fade. Some days there was work, other days there was none. The little savings he had managed to protect slowly disappeared. He started counting every coin, planning each meal carefully. Hunger was not always loud, but it was always present. It followed him like a shadow, reminding him that survival was now a daily effort. Then his body began to fail him. At first it was small things, constant tiredness, headaches that did not go away, and nights without proper sleep. He ignored these signs, telling himself that weakness was a luxury he could not afford. He continued working whenever he could, pushing his body beyond its limits. One morning he collapsed from exhaustion. There was no drama, no crowd gathering around him. He simply fell, like someone whose strength had quietly run out. When he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by unfamiliar walls and unfamiliar faces. The cost of care worried him more than his condition. As he lay there staring at the ceiling, he felt fear in a way he never had before. Recovery was slow. He was advised to rest, but rest required time and money, two things he did not have. Unable to work properly and unable to heal quickly, he found himself trapped between need and limitation. Each day felt like walking uphill with heavy weight on his back. People who once promised support were now silent. Some offered words but no help. Others disappeared completely. He learned that sympathy was easy to give from a distance, but true support was rare. This realization hurt more than the physical pain. Loneliness grew stronger during this period. He spent long hours alone, listening to the sounds of the city from a small room that barely felt like home. His thoughts often turned dark, questioning whether his efforts had any meaning. He wondered if life was slowly asking him to give up. It was during one of these quiet evenings that he encountered the Apache woman again. She noticed the change in him immediately. His steps were slower, his face thinner, and his eyes carried a deeper tiredness. She did not ask what had happened. Instead, she sat nearby, sharing the silence. After a long moment, she spoke. Her voice carried surprise mixed with disbelief. She said she had seen many people fall after just one hardship, yet he was still standing after facing another. Her words were not praise, they were an honest observation. She looked at him as if trying to understand how this was possible. He smiled weakly, unsure of the answer himself. He did not feel strong. He felt worn down and uncertain. But something inside him refused to surrender completely. He told her that stopping felt more painful than continuing, even if continuing hurt. The second trial was different from the first. The first took away his position in the world. The second attacked his health and hope. It tested his patience more deeply and forced him to face himself without any protection. There were no titles, no plans, and no clear future, only the present moment and the decision to survive it. Days blended into each other. Some were filled with quiet progress, others with setbacks. He learned to celebrate small victories, like waking up with less pain or finding work for a few hours. These moments reminded him that progress did not always come in big steps. The Apache woman continued to observe him from time to time. She did not offer solutions or comfort. Instead, she shared short stories from her own past, stories about endurance, about people who learned strength through loss. She spoke of trials as teachers, not punishments. Her words planted seeds in his mind, even when he did not fully understand them. There were nights when doubt returned strongly. On those nights, he questioned whether standing still was the same as moving forward. But each morning, he still rose from his bed. Even when fear whispered that his efforts were meaningless, he chose action over surrender. Slowly, his health improved. It was not a full recovery, but enough to allow him to move forward again. He began finding steadier work, though it was still far from secure. His body remained fragile, but his mind grew sharper. He had learned how to endure discomfort without letting it define him. By the end of the second trial, he was no longer the same man who had lost his job. He was quieter, more aware, and less dependent on approval. The world had tested him twice, and though he carried scars, he remained upright. When the Apache woman finally spoke again, her tone was different. She admitted that surviving more than one trial often breaks people. Seeing him still standing challenged what she believed possible. Her words stayed with him, marking the end of the second trial and the beginning of a deeper understanding. The second trial did not make him victorious. It did not bring success or comfort. But it gave him something more lasting, a calm resilience and the knowledge that even when life pressed hard, he could endure. After the second trial passed, life did not suddenly reward him. There was no celebration, no moment where everything felt safe again. Instead, there was a long, quiet stretch of time where nothing dramatic happened. This period was harder than it looked. It was the time between ruin and recovery, where progress was slow and almost invisible. He lived carefully now. Every decision mattered. He planned his days with patience, waking up early and resting when his body demanded it. He no longer pushed himself to prove anything to anyone. He had learned that forcing strength only led to collapse. True strength, he discovered, was steady and respectful of limits. Work came and went, but he accepted it without complaint. He showed up on time, completed tasks honestly, and left quietly. People noticed his reliability, even if they did not say much. Trust began to rebuild, slowly and naturally. He did not chase attention. He focused on consistency. During this time, his thoughts changed. Earlier, his mind was full of noise, regret, fear, and questions without answers. Now, his thoughts became clearer. He spent time reflecting on his past mistakes without blaming himself endlessly. He understood that some losses were not failures but lessons delivered harshly. He also became more observant of others. He noticed tired faces, worried eyes, and silent struggles around him. Before, he might have ignored these details. Now, hardship had sharpened his awareness. He learned to listen more than speak, and to offer help without expecting anything in return. The quiet place near the edge of town became his regular refuge again. He sat there often, watching the sky change colors and listening to the wind move through open space. It reminded him that life continued even when humans struggled. This simple truth brought him peace. The Apache woman still appeared from time to time. She never interrupted his silence. She respected it. When she spoke, her words were few but meaningful. She once told him that people often mistake noise for strength, but true endurance lives quietly. He understood what she meant now. She noticed how he carried himself differently. There was less tension in his shoulders, less urgency in his movements. Though his life was still uncertain, he was no longer at war with himself. That inner calm surprised her. Many people survive hardship but remain angry. He did not. There were moments when memories returned sharply. The job he lost, the people who walked away, the nights filled with fear. These memories did not disappear, but they lost their power over him. He allowed them to exist without letting them control his present. One afternoon, he faced a small but meaningful test. He was offered work that promised quick money but required him to ignore his values. In the past, desperation might have pushed him to accept. This time he refused. The decision was difficult, but it felt right. Walking away from that offer gave him quiet confidence. This period taught him discipline. He learned to manage time, energy, and emotions carefully. He stopped reacting quickly and started responding thoughtfully. When problems appeared, he paused instead of panicking. This change did not come overnight. It was built through repeated effort. The Apache woman observed all of this without praise. In her culture, growth did not need applause. She once told him that a tree does not announce its roots growing deeper. It simply stands stronger when storms arrive. He carried this image with him. Loneliness still visited him, especially during evenings. But it was different now. It no longer felt empty or frightening. He used that time to read, reflect, and rest. He discovered that being alone did not mean being weak. Sometimes it meant being honest with oneself. Slowly, opportunities began to align, not because life became kind, but because he was prepared to recognize them. A steady role appeared, modest but stable. It did not restore his old status, but it gave him dignity and structure. He accepted it with gratitude, not excitement. His health continued to improve. He respected his body's signals and avoided extremes. He understood that healing was not about returning to who he was, but becoming someone wiser. His scars, both seen and unseen, became reminders of survival, not shame. The Apache woman finally spoke with clear acknowledgement one day. She told him that many people collapse between trials, not during them. They grow tired of waiting, tired of uncertainty. He had endured that space without losing himself. This impressed her deeply. He realized then that this part of his journey was about building unseen strength. No one applauded it, no one documented it, but it was the foundation for whatever came next. Without this quiet rebuilding, future challenges would break him. As time passed, he felt a subtle shift inside. Fear no longer guided his decisions. Hope did not feel desperate. He accepted that life would always contain risk and pain, but he also trusted his ability to face it. The third phase did not bring dramatic change, but it brought balance. He was not whole, but he was steady. Not successful, but prepared. He stood firmly, not because the ground was solid, but because he had learned how to stand on uncertain ground. Somewhere nearby, the Apache woman continued to watch, no longer questioning his survival. She understood now that what looked ordinary from the outside was extraordinary on the inside. He was not just surviving between ruins. He was rebuilding quietly, piece by piece, becoming stronger than he had ever been before. Life had settled into a steady rhythm when the next challenge arrived. It did not come loudly or suddenly. It came quietly, almost politely, as if testing whether he was truly prepared. By this time, he had learned that silence often carried the biggest changes. The stable role he had found began to shift. Management changed, rules were rewritten, and uncertainty returned. Rumors moved through the workplace like slow wind. Some people panicked, others complained, and many waited helplessly. He listened carefully but did not react. Experience had taught him that fear spreads faster than truth. One afternoon, he was called into a meeting. The room felt familiar in an uncomfortable way, reminding him of the first trial. For a brief moment, old memories tried to rise. His heart beat faster, but he controlled his breath. He reminded himself that he was no longer the same person who had once walked out with a box in his hands. The conversation was direct. The position he depended on might no longer exist in the coming months. There were no promises, only uncertainty. He thanked them calmly and left the room with steady steps. Outside, he paused, letting the information settle without letting it crush him. This was the third major test, but it felt different from the earlier ones. Before, fear had led the way. Now, awareness did. He did not deny the risk, but he also did not let it steal his balance. That evening, instead of worrying endlessly, he planned carefully. He reviewed his skills, his limits, and his options. He updated his records, reached out quietly to contacts, and explored new paths without desperation. Each action was small but purposeful. He was no longer waiting for life to decide everything for him. Stress returned, but it did not overwhelm him. He noticed it, respected it, and managed it. When sleep became difficult, he adjusted his routine. When doubt appeared, he faced it honestly instead of running from it. These habits were the result of lessons earned the hard way. During this period, the Apache woman appeared more often. She sensed the shift in his energy. He was calm, but there was intensity beneath it, like someone preparing quietly for a long journey. She did not ask what was happening. She trusted that he would speak when ready. One evening he shared the situation with her, not as a complaint but as a fact. She listened without interruption. When he finished, she nodded slowly. She said that some trials return to see if a person has truly changed. Her words were simple, but they stayed with him. As weeks passed, pressure increased. Some coworkers gave up early, searching elsewhere in panic. Others became bitter. He chose a different path. He continued working with honesty and effort, knowing that his behavior now would shape future opportunities, even if this one ended. Then came a moment that tested him deeply. He was offered a chance to secure his position by agreeing to unfair terms that would harm others. The offer was quiet and tempting. It promised safety in exchange for silence. His past struggles flashed before him. He knew what insecurity felt like. He asked for time to think. That night he barely slept. The decision was not easy. Accepting would protect him, at least for now. Refusing could place him back into uncertainty, but something inside him was clear. Survival without self-respect was not survival at all. The next day he declined the offer calmly. He explained his reasons without anger or pride. The reaction was cold. He understood the risk immediately, but instead of fear, he felt an unexpected peace. He had chosen alignment over safety. News of his decision spread quietly. Some respected him silently, others avoided him. The outcome became clearer with time. His position was eventually removed. This time, however, the ending did not feel like a collapse. It felt like a closing chapter. Walking away again was not easy, but it was different. There was no shame, no confusion, no feeling of worthlessness. He walked away with clarity. He knew who he was, what he could endure, and what he would not trade away. The days that followed were challenging. Income stopped, routines broke, and uncertainty returned. But panic did not. He used the systems he had built during the quiet rebuilding phase. He adjusted his budget, expanded his search, and stayed disciplined. Unexpectedly, new connections emerged. People who had noticed his consistency before now reached out. A modest opportunity appeared, not through force, but through trust. It was not impressive on the surface, but it was honest and aligned with his values. He accepted it carefully. The work was demanding but fair. The environment respected effort over appearance. Slowly, stability returned once more, not quickly but surely. Each step felt earned. The Apache woman observed all of this with deep interest. When she finally spoke, her words carried weight. She said she had doubted before whether surviving more than 2 trials without breaking was real. Watching him face another challenge with calm and integrity changed her belief. She admitted that many people grow strong only when watched. He had grown strong even when unseen. That, she said, was rare. He did not feel proud. He felt grounded. He understood now that trials were not enemies. They were mirrors. Each one showed him something new about himself. Fear, patience, discipline, and values, all revealed through pressure. The fourth part of his journey did not end with victory or comfort. It ended with understanding. He no longer measured success by stability alone, but by alignment between actions and beliefs. Standing there, looking at the path behind him, he saw pain, loss, and struggle, but he also saw growth that could not have come any other way. He was still standing, not because life spared him, but because he had learned how to stand correctly. And for the first time, even as uncertainty remained ahead, he trusted himself completely. The final phase of his journey did not begin with a big moment. There was no loud announcement, no sudden turn of fortune. It began quietly, like most meaningful changes in his life. He continued working steadily, learning the rhythm of his new role and understanding the people around him. The work demanded patience and honesty, two qualities he now carried naturally. Each morning he woke up with purpose, not excitement. He no longer expected life to be easy. Instead, he expected it to be real. This shift in thinking made a difference. He was not chasing comfort anymore. He was building stability step by step. His past trials stayed with him, but they no longer weighed him down. They became reference points. Whenever a problem appeared, he remembered what he had already survived. This memory gave him confidence, not arrogance. He knew he could handle difficulty, even if he did not know how everything would turn out. People around him began to notice something different. He spoke less but listened more. When challenges appeared, he did not complain or panic. He focused on solutions. This calm behavior slowly earned trust, not because he tried to impress anyone, but because consistency speaks louder than words. The Apache woman remained a quiet presence in his life. She appeared less often now, not because distance had grown, but because observation was no longer necessary. She had already seen what she needed to see. Still, when they did meet, their conversations carried depth. One evening, they sat together in silence for a long time. The sky changed colors slowly, just as it always had. After a while, she spoke softly. She said that many people survive hardship, but few allow it to shape them without turning bitter. He had done that. He had allowed pain to refine him instead of hardening him. He reflected on her words deeply. He realized that bitterness had visited him many times. It had knocked on his door during lonely nights and uncertain days. But each time, he chose patience instead. Not because it was easy, but because bitterness required too much energy to carry. Life continued to test him in smaller ways. Deadlines, misunderstandings, and unexpected obstacles appeared, but none of them shook him deeply. He addressed each one with care. When he made mistakes, he accepted them and corrected them. When others failed, he showed understanding. Slowly, his sense of self grew stronger. He no longer defined himself by success or failure. He defined himself by effort and integrity. This inner clarity brought a kind of freedom he had never known before. There came a moment when he was asked to guide someone else who was struggling. The request surprised him. He did not see himself as a guide or leader, but he accepted. He shared his experiences honestly, without drama. He did not promise easy answers. He simply shared what he had learned about patience, discipline, and endurance. Watching someone else benefit from his words filled him with quiet fulfillment. It reminded him that his pain had meaning beyond himself. It had prepared him to understand others in ways comfort never could. His life did not become perfect. There were still days when he felt tired, days when the future felt unclear. But the fear that once controlled him was gone. He had replaced it with trust in his own resilience. The Apache woman eventually spoke the words that once held doubt. She said she had once questioned whether anyone could remain standing after more than 2 trials. Now she spoke those words differently. There was no disbelief in her voice anymore, only respect. She said that standing was not about refusing to fall. It was about learning how to rise without losing oneself. He understood this completely. As time passed, he found balance. Work, rest, and reflection formed a steady rhythm. He no longer rushed life or resisted it. He moved with it, adapting when necessary and standing firm when required. Looking back, he saw a man who had been stripped of comfort, health, certainty, and approval. That man no longer existed. In his place stood someone quieter, steadier, and deeply grounded. He understood now that trials did not come to destroy him. They came to teach him who he was when everything else was taken away, and what remained was enough. There was no final victory scene, no dramatic ending. His success was simple. He woke up each day with clarity, acted with honesty, and rested with peace. That was more than he had ever hoped for during his darkest moments. He was still standing. Not because life became gentle, but because he learned how to stand within it. And that, he realized, was real.